These documents are proof that these things happened. They're authentic, they're real. There's not a lot of that left in the world these days, it seems.
Well, we'll just dive right into it. This is Mark Adams, director of the Truman Presidential Library, and you are hosting right now, Opening the Vault, the Story of Us. Before we dig into specifics on this, Mark, let's just take the big picture, broad overview. What exactly is this?
Yeah, so this exhibit is timed to coincide with the 250th anniversary of our nation. We're commemorating that on July 4th, of course. 250 years since 1776. So we put an exhibit together that tells the whole story, the whole 250 years. I know some of the places are focused primarily on the Declaration of Independence. We've decided to look at all those 250 years, all the things that have happened. And then, of course, the highlight is these 21 documents that we have from the National Archives that we're very proud to display.
So 21 documents. I've read about this. It sounds like this is one of the largest collections of the touring exhibit. How did you make that happen?
Yeah, we twisted some arms for convincing in our proposal. They offered them primarily to the presidential libraries because we are part of the National Archives. And so we kind of got first bite at it. Our financial supporters, the Truman Library Institute, committed to buying additional exhibit cases. So we had enough space and cases that meet all of the standards that the National Archives require as well. And then we built ourselves, designed and built a whole exhibit surrounding the 21 documents as well. So quite a process.
So these cases have to be built to specifically protect these documents, which are unique,
That's
irreplaceable,
right.
I guess you would say.
Yeah, that's right. We have to monitor the temperature, the humidity, the light levels. So not only do the cases have to meet certain standards, but our gallery itself has to meet certain standards as well. And because we were able to meet all of those criteria, we're able to display all 21 documents.
So with the 21 documents, you have a document related to the Louisiana Purchase. When you look at this document, and I'm going to ask you this on a couple of these, what should you look for? Because some of this, the writing, you kind of look at the writing and it's in cursive and you're kind of trying to read it, and some of it's hard to read. So what do you want to pay attention to most with this document?
Yeah, I think you're right. Not only is the writing hard to read, and sometimes it's small, sometimes it's cursive, and some people struggle with that. Sometimes even the cursive that I can read, it can be difficult to read. And then, of course, the light levels we have in our gallery are quite low. So some of the documents you have to kind of get up close, but stay behind the case, right? To look at them. But yeah, they're very revealing. So you can see the lot in that particular document, the larger titles are a lot easier to read than maybe the text in the body. So you can see it's an agreement between the United States and France. And then you learn more about that. We have a booklet that we give out to all the visitors. And that accompanying booklet describes how this treaty takes place between the United States and France and essentially doubles the size of the nation, which is kind of incredible if you think about it. So yeah, sometimes they're hard to read, but just being close to them, seeing the titles, and then maybe squinting a little bit and getting in as close as you can without damaging them, you can see some of the details on the page and really start to investigate them, really.
Without that document, you and I would not be on the land we're sitting on right now.
That's exactly right. And we have a number of documents that do relate to the state of Missouri, including that, of course, the Louisiana Purchase, but a number of others like the Compromise of 1820 and some of the other court cases that we refer to a little bit later on as well.
And documents specifically related to President Truman, including Executive Order 99 1881, correct?
Yes, that's the executive order where Truman um, ordered the desegregation of the military. And in fact, in 1998, when we had the anniversary for that 1948 document, Colin Powell came here to Independence and said without that executive order, he wouldn't have had the military career that he had.
Mm.
So a very far-reaching document that was 1 year after Jackie Robinson, if we think about integration of baseball, but 6 years before Brown v. Board and school integration. So it's right in the thick of all of these attempts to integrate our nation. And Truman's decision to do that was very controversial in an election year and seen as a very brave decision to integrate the military. And so the Brown v. Board of Education in Topeka document is also one of the 21 documents that we have.
Brown v. Board being very important, if you wouldn't mind explaining that to our viewers.
Absolutely, yeah, that's where we have a school segregation overruled by the Supreme Court, and they have integrated schools as a result of that. It overrules the previous Supreme Court decision of Plessy versus Ferguson. We have that on display as well. Having
Okay.
these documents kind of close together, it kind of helps tell the story because you see the missteps with Plessy versus Ferguson, and then the correction with Brown v. Board of Education. And then it didn't really stop there. We have Dwight Eisenhower's executive order in 1957 around Little Rock High School because some states were objecting to school integration. And then taking it further, in 1965, we have the Voting Rights Act, which expanded voting rights for African Americans as well. So in some of these documents, there's a story to tell when you connect 4 or 5 of them together.
It does sound like this is a story as you walk through and it's in sections. How is it organized in that way?
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it, Paul. We have a 46-foot timeline, but it's broken down into kind of pre-1776 with a 6-foot timeline, and then 50-year blocks. So 50 years, about 8 foot long, go from 1776 to 1826, and then we carry on with that timeline in these 50-year blocks all the way through 2026. And that timeline really helps tell the story, as the title suggests, the story of the United States, but it's also the story of us.
250 years we're celebrating this year, and you have the Bill of Rights, which is not 250 years old, but pretty close to it.
Right.
Has the Bill of Rights, I've seen it in Washington, D.C., has this been on what you might call tour before?
This is a slightly different version of the Bill of Rights.
I
In
see.
fact, in some ways, it's more fascinating. It's the Senate revisions to the
Ah,
Bill of Rights. So you can actually see pencil marks in the margin, articles scratched out, handwriting in the. They had 12 amendments that they suggested. We know that the Bill of Rights is 10 amendments, and we kind of think of it as being carved in stone. Those are our Bill of Rights. Those are our first 10 amendments. We forget that, of course, the legislators debated these and argued about them. And so I know I'm a little biased because that's the document we have on display, but seeing these Senate revisions and the pencil marks and the debate is happening on this page. So that's a really fascinating document to have. The original Bill of Rights is on display at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And so having these Senate revisions is very enlightening to see the discussions. Where is religion going to fit? Where are they're shuffling them around, grouping things together. So it's a really fascinating. In fact, I was here on Sunday watching our visitors, and all of the documents are getting a lot of attention, but that one in particular, it's towards the beginning of the exhibits from 1789. And people are really fascinated. And that one is a little bit easier to read than the Louisiana Purchase. So people are gathering around that case and looking at it and seeing if they can figure out what the senators were arguing about. So really, really interesting document.
you said two were scratched out. Would have been 12. I was
Yeah.
not aware of that. what are the two that would have been in this document?
Yeah, so some of them they argue about later. Don't recall the detail right in front of me right now, but
Okay.
the ones that we started to question later. In fact, the 27th Amendment is one of those two, and that's to do with payment of Congress and things like that. I'm not getting the detail correct, but there's some that come up later on, but they certainly considered more than we realized back in 1789.
That is very interesting to me and something when you go through to look for those scratched out pencil marks on that document. What do you think Truman would have thought of all this in a presidential library in his name? I know he oversaw um, the library, but he doesn't see it in present day time. What do you think he would have thought of all this?
I think he would have been thrilled. I think when he worked here at this library, we have his office that you can see in our permanent exhibit that he worked in. But he always wanted this place to be a place where you study government, where you study civics. He didn't, quite frankly, want it necessarily to be about him. Our museum is about him. But with these special exhibits like this that help us understand the American government, where we've come from, I think he would have been thrilled about that. I think that we have videos actually with Truman featured in the exhibit. He talks about the Declaration of Independence. His most founding document that he recognized as being the most important was actually the Bill of Rights. He thought that was because it protected the people through those first 10 amendments. So I think he would have been thrilled that we're looking at American history, teaching everybody through these exhibits where we've come from, where we can go next. Through these documents, I think he would have been really excited to do that. I think that's more of what he wanted this place to be. He always wanted it to be a classroom for democracy. And I think this exhibit is a prime example of that.
What is the one thing or the big takeaway you hope people leave with when they walk through and are finished with this exhibit? What story of America do you hope they contemplate or think about a day or two down the road?
Yeah, I think these authentic documents really help inform us. We often have debates about whether things happened or whether they didn't. And these documents are proof that these things happened. They're authentic, they're real. There's not a lot of that left in the world these days, it seems. So the authenticity of these documents is really touching. You get some people in the galleries get quite emotional when they look at like Brown versus the Board of Education or the executive order or the 13th Amendment, things like that. They do get a connection to those. So I think that as they're walking away, they get a better understanding of where we have come from and where we are headed, and our history can help inform that. So I think visitors should realize the importance of history, the importance of original documents, and how that informs them for the future. To think about missteps we've made and the decisions we've made that have advanced our nation. These documents have examples of both of those.
Before I let you go, what is your favorite document or a document that we haven't talked about among the 21? We've mentioned several.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I change every time I walk through. I feel like I change my mind. I think I started out with the Bill of Rights and the Senate revisions, and we mentioned that. And I think that is one of my favorites. It's up there. I think the Louisiana Purchase we mentioned at the beginning of our conversation. Those are kind of my favorites from the beginning period. We have a number of 20th century documents. I think one that stands out to me is the armistice agreement between North and South Korea, because we still have not ended that conflict officially. So seeing that agreement between North and South Korea, that President Truman, of course, was responsible at the beginning of that conflict in 1950. And then the other one I think that really hits home is the Voting Rights of 1965. We see it a little bit under threat recently in the news. And so I think a lot of people gravitate towards that when they see when we get into the 20th century. Part of the exhibit, it's got LBJ's signature right on there. It's very clear. It's a typed document. It's maybe a little easier to read. And I think that's a momentous piece of legislation in the 1960s. And like I said, some of it's being questioned right now. So it's a living document that reminds us of the decisions we made.
Well, this will be on display through the end of May, uh, toward the end of May anyway, and people can come see it. Is there a fee to get in to see this?
There's no extra fee. It's free with museum admission. So there's no extra charge for this particular exhibit.
Well, I hope people get a chance to see this and walk away with some things to think about.
Absolutely. We had nearly 1,000 people this last weekend over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we're going to continue to do that until May 24th is the last day. So we're really excited that people can come, see these documents, and see the rest of our museum while they're here. We have a world-class museum.
All right. Mark Adams with the Truman Presidential Library. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Paul.